Hello and welcome to Chino and the Hills. Today I'm sitting down with Chino Hills City Council member Peter Rogers. Welcome, Peter.
Thank you very much, Thomas.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for sitting down with me, taking the time out of your schedule.
Of course.
Absolutely. We'll get right into the questions from here. So just to start off, why don't you tell us who you are, where you grew up, kind of your origin story, and then ultimately how you ended up here in Chino Hills.
Certainly. First of all, I wanted to thank Denise Barr for recommending me for this. It's great to do community outreach, whatever mechanism we use. So thank you to Denise for the opportunity to do this.
Yeah.
So how I got started?
Yeah.
From birth,
Day one.
birth to
Yeah.
now?
Yeah.
Well, this is
It's a
not
short
something,
story, right?
Well, just sit back and relax. I was born in Bakersfield, California.
Okay.
I don't admit that to a lot of people, but I'm sure just a couple of people are watching
Yeah.
this. But my parents, and this was post-war with my parents, they're both in World War II, they're both in the Army. And somehow they ended up in the Central Valley, born there, and then we immediately moved to Covina, California.
Okay.
So I was raised in Covina, California, or Covina my up through the start of college.
Okay.
I lived in Covina. My parents both workers. It was very unique for my mother because at that time, females were usually the home, caring for home and family
Right.
and kids.
What does she do for work?
She was a nurse.
Okay.
So in World War II, she was a lieutenant in a fighting brigade called Maros Marauders.
Got it.
And she was in Burma, and she was a MASH unit for,
Wow.
I know, pretty, it was,
And then just transition that.
and then she became a county health nurse after the war.
Got it.
And she was somehow located in San Joaquin Valley.
There you go.
So she was full-time, and so it was one of those types of families where both parents were working. We're used to it now, but then it was very unique.
Yeah.
But we lived in a great community and great neighbors, and everybody watched out for each other. So it was, it's not like maybe it is now in today's society where you have to be extra careful no matter where you are.
Sure.
But then raised in Covina, and at that time I was Catholic schools my whole life. So I went to elementary Catholic schools, and then I went to Damien High School in Laverne, and it was about 5 miles away, so I hopped on RTD, so I learned about rapid transit from the very beginning as a freshman, and went to school that way until I was able to drive. Graduated from Damien.
Any sports at Damien?
I was not track.
Track.
So I was
Okay.
track.
Gotcha.
I was more, it turned into more the artistic thing, which we'll talk about later, which was photography and that sort of thing, but I was track. And then I graduated and then went to Cal Poly Pomona. And
Go Broncos.
Go Broncos, I agree. It was I started out as an engineering major, and it did not take very long to realize that I was not wired for that.
Fair enough.
Okay, it went very quickly. So after the first quarter, and it was all mostly freshman type classes
Sure.
anyway. But as I was talking to advisors, et cetera, I realized, okay, that's not for me. So I went into the journalism side of things and communications, and I became a communications/journalism major at Cal Poly Pomona,
Okay.
and graduated in 4 years. From there, less than 4 years, 3.5 years. But all that time, I was really into photography. In high school, I was a yearbook editor as a senior, and also I was the photographer for the campus newspaper and yearbook.
Sure.
So I transitioned that into the same thing at Cal Poly Pomona. We had the best time at Cal Poly. It was a great school. There were maybe 13,000, 14,000 people there at the time.
Okay.
The campus was as beautiful as it is.
Yeah.
So I became the campus photographer from the very beginning. As a freshman, they had sophomore, juniors, and seniors on the photo staff for the Poly Post. You remember the Poly Post?
Sure.
But we also had a yearbook there and a magazine, and I became the photo editor after my second quarter of the Poly Post, and I was that way almost all 3.5, 4 years.
Very good.
So I was in photography the whole time. At some point, I transitioned also into, I was being paid as a campus photographer.
Oh, okay.
The sports
Yeah,
sides of things. I would cover the football games, and I'd be paid by the campus to cover it for the campus.
Football games. Now that's a change.
Cal Poly and football. I was there during football. Well, I was for all of them, but
Yeah,
football,
yeah.
how long has it been gone?
A long time. A
Yeah.
long time. The story that I heard is that the last game they played, they lost like 100-0, and that's when they decided to
100-0. Okay, it's time to make a change.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but football was very key at the time.
Yeah.
I remember a friend of mine, I mean, I'm not really know him now, but a guy named Wayne Gross was the punter, and he
Okay.
was very well known. He was
Yeah.
also on the baseball team. He ended up on the Baltimore Orioles and
Okay.
Oakland A's.
Yeah.
I mean, so they did develop good players,
Yeah.
but he was the football guy. One
There
of
you
the,
go.
Anyway, football.
Yeah.
I covered football and
Yeah.
everything on campus.
Yeah.
And then when I graduated from Cal Poly, I had done Cal Poly, you do senior projects,
Yeah.
almost like a master's
Yeah.
thesis. I had done my senior project photography-wise with a friend on Kenya. So we went to Kenya for a month and did the whole thing and recorded it and photographed it, and we put together at the time something called a film strip.
Okay.
So it was we all remember it from grammar school, at least some of us, it was like a slideshow, and then a beep, and then you would click it to the next thing, and it was on an audio, there was an audio cassette that
Okay.
went with it. So
Wow.
we produced those.
Yeah.
We actually sold them to local grammar schools as a kind of a result of our senior project.
Right. Yeah.
But graduated and then went on to you have to do an internship for a lot of the majors. I did an internship at the Sangre Valley Tribune
Okay.
as a press photographer. As soon as I graduated, I was hired full-time to be a press photographer for the Sangre Valley Tribune. I did that for almost a year, about a year. And then had an opportunity with a big engineering company called, at the time, CF Braun.
Okay.
Braun, Fluor, Bechtel, Parsons, the big four in the United States for engineering.
Mhm.
Massive projects all
So you
over.
got into engineering.
I got into engineering. I never thought about
Yeah,
that.
there you go.
I
Yeah.
did. I backdoored into engineering
yeah,
somehow because
yeah.
I was hanging around all the engineers.
Yeah.
So and I knew how they were wired because I was not wired that way, as I said.
There you go.
So I was there for 10 years. And I oversaw photography for our little crew of 3. It was a CF Braun was then acquired by Santa Fe International. We were a publicly held company at the time, so we started doing annual reports. I was traveling all over the world as the photographer for Braun/Santa Fe.
Yeah.
And traveled everywhere.
Wow.
I literally traveled everywhere on assignments to Egypt and Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and all over Europe and Korea and Singapore. So I had those opportunities during those years.
Did you have a favorite place? What during that travel?
So the favorite place, just culturally, I would say Egypt.
Okay.
Had a wonderful time in Egypt. We were
Yeah.
there for almost a week. I had 2 photo assignments there, and the company let me be a tourist in the middle.
Yeah.
Did a photo assignment in Alexandria, which is the top of Egypt, and then
Okay.
did a photo assignment on the Sinai Peninsula. They were into oil and gas. They did big refineries
Sure.
and process plants, and they built the Budweiser place in Van Nuys.
Okay.
That was CF Braun. They were major constructor, contractor. And I did one of them was we drove down the Sinai Peninsula, hopped on a helicopter, cruised in, I don't know how long, half an hour, into the Red Sea, landed on an oil platform. I photographed what I was there to photograph for the annual report, and spent the night, and then flew back and drove back around. And so those are my 2 photo assignments. Then interspersed with that was just the cultural richness of Egypt with the museum and the pyramids. And we flew down to Karnak, and we were around the Valley of the Kings and Valley of the Queens. I've been inside King Tut's tomb.
Wow.
Before it was probably very regulated.
Right.
Now,
Sure.
I was in
Yeah.
King Tut's tomb, and they were still trying to, the tunnel, you could go in, and
Okay.
no photograph,
Yeah,
please,
yeah.
which I did.
Yeah.
Of course, I had my little thing, cable release and
Yeah.
photographed
There you
it
go.
those were during the film days.
Yeah.
But Egypt's probably one of my favorites.
Okay.
Visually, Yosemite's probably my favorite place
Okay.
in the world.
Gotcha.
Or maybe a place like Austria.
Yeah.
But I did
Yeah.
have was able to have cultural enrichment with
Sure.
my job, which
Yeah.
was awesome.
Yeah. Definitely.
And at some point, I was also doing freelance work independently. And, I had clients of friends that had graduated from Cal Poly. They were now going on to their careers, and I was doing some Saturday and Sunday type photography for some of those companies. And then eventually started my own business.
Got it.
And I've had it for about 30 years now.
And at what point? What brought you to Chino Hills? At what point did you get here?
Okay, my wife, I met my wife at Cal Poly Pomona, Mary.
Okay.
And Mary and I started dating, and then we were married 3 years later. We initially lived in Glendora, just very briefly, and then we moved to Topland.
Okay.
Because a friend of ours, a friend named Bill, Bill had, his grandma or his family owned a couple of homes, but one was a little bungalow right out of the Midwest, really, right across the street from San Antonio Hospital.
Okay.
So we rented it for a year or so,
Yeah.
and then we found a house in Upland and bought the house and lived there for several years.
Okay.
And then my wife had taken a couple of years off as we had our children. We have 2 boys, which I'll talk about later.
Okay.
So Chris and Kevin. And they, when Kevin was born, who's the youngest of the 2, my wife decided to take 2 years off. She worked for Mervin's at the time, and they had a center near the Ontario airport. One of the first warehouses really in the region was Mervin's.
Wow.
And she was human resources.
Okay.
She is and was human resources.
Got
And
it.
so she was like the manager
Yeah.
in that warehouse,
Yeah.
in that facility. She decided to take a couple years off. And at that point, after 2 years, she realized she wanted a little more adult professional interaction again.
Yeah.
We thought Kevin and Chris my father was around. My father was assisting and watching the kids
good for
also.
you.
As
Yeah.
I was commuting to Alhambra, which
Okay.
is where CF Braun/Santa Fe was located. And so she immediately put out a resume and within a week had picked up a job in the city of Orange.
Okay.
We got the city of Orange over here and Upland over here, and I'm going to Alhambra.
Yeah.
We decided to shorten that triangle, and we started looking around. We were looking at San Dimas, and we happened upon an area as we were driving around, Carbon Canyon. I had heard about Carbon Canyon in my Damien days because a lot of my car club buddies were coming down to Carbon Canyon
Sure.
Road and doing
Yeah.
their thing on
Yeah.
Saturdays.
Yeah.
Whatever that thing is,
Right, yeah.
I wasn't with them. And so I was familiar with Carbon Canyon in that regard. So we drove down Peyton, which was just a 2-lane road at the time. Nothing was on it. And turned right onto Carbon Canyon. We saw the real estate signs and ended up at Summit Ranch.
Okay.
Was not called Summit Ranch at the time. Part of it was called The Ranch and part of it was called Summit Trails. It was Summit something, and then later the name merged. But we ended up there and bought the house, and here we are 30 plus years, 32 years later.
Yeah. So what year would that be?
We moved in September 30th of 1986.
All right.
So we were county at the time, and the zip code was 91710, which was Chino.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we were county,
Yeah. Right.
county facilities, and so just, here we were.
There you go.
Sometimes I put Chino as my address, sometimes I put Carbon Canyon because I was kind of unsure
Right.
where I lived.
Yeah. Eventually the postman will get it
Yeah,
to you.
but we loved, as soon as we drove into the canyon, we said, oh, this is fantastic. We need to live there.
Yeah. So now, obviously, fast forwarding a number of years, for those of you that don't know, what is your position here in Chino Hills, and how are you involved kind of in the community?
Okay, so
I know
fast
that's
forwarding.
a pretty broad,
It is.
broad number of things.
So
but-
currently, I'm on the city council, city council member. So the city council, the city was formed, you skipped a major portion, by the way, which is the history of. But we became a city in 1991. The original city council was formed based on the top 5 vote getters in November of 1991.
Okay.
And then I was on our homeowners association at the time, on the board at
Got it.
that time.
Got
I
it.
became Little League president, or Little League, Canyon Hills Little League, and then president for a while. But our form of government, and a lot of cities do this as they rotate the mayor's position.
Sure.
So when I was eventually elected, since we're fast forwarding
Yeah.
to there, I've been the mayor 3 times at the city, including fairly recently,
Yeah.
and we just rotate our positions around. And so I'm in my 14th year.
Okay.
So I'm now, I hate to say it, the senior person
Got it.
on city council. When Ed Graham left 2.5 years ago, he was the last remaining original council member. He'd been in 25 years. And then, so now I'm in
So you have
that
11
role.
left.
I've got, yes I do. Thanks for letting me know
At
that,
least.
Thomas, yes. So that's my role, I'm a city council member.
Got it. Okay. And then what other things in the community do you mentioned the
I'm-
Little League and
I'm pretty active, but so yes, my kids, when they were in Little League, I stopped after 5 years on the HOA board of directors. I was president all those years. I don't know how that happened, but I was. And that's when our community really started to grow. and we renamed it Summit Ranch at the time. So everybody that's on Carbon Canyon knows Summit Ranch is the first community inside Carbon Canyon from the Chino Hills side. And then my kids went into Little League and Pony League as that was being formed during those days, and I became the president of I was vice president, and someone left, and everybody said, "You are going to be president." I said, "I've only been here a year."
Yeah.
"No, you're going to be president." So I became president for a couple of years.
Okay.
And those were the rough and tumble days when the city and anybody that's into sports, they know there's field allocations that go on, and you've got AYSO soccer.
Yeah.
You've got the 2 little leagues currently, and Pony League and girls softball. You were fighting at that time for those spots.
Right.
Where to practice and where to play.
Yeah.
We're at the old community park, which is now Trader Joe's,
Yeah.
and Wood Ranch Barbecue. Wood Ranch is where the police station was, but that's what my era was at those 6 fields
Right.
over there at the time.
Got it.
And then I had a lot of interaction with the city when we would get together as a group at the beginning of the different seasons, and we'd sit in this room. It was called Sports Council, and usually the presidents of all of those would get together and hash out who was going to get what field number 1, field number 2, the older kids field number 3 or 4, girls softball was usually 3, and we'd fight it out to see who had the most numbers that year for signups.
Gotcha.
And who was going to get what priorities. I think it was during that time that one of the individuals on our city, this is probably in 95, 96, 90, no, this is probably 97 or 98. His name is Jonathan Marshall. He still works here at City Hall. Jonathan said to me, "You handle these groups pretty well. You kind of help steer things as you're trying to negotiate, Pony League, I want this field, and girls softball, and Chino Canyon Hills. You seem to be the peacemaker." There's a position open for a commissioner in town, and Mike Wickman, each council member assigns 3 individuals to the 3 different commissions. Okay. And he said, "I'm going to recommend you to Mike because there's an opening." And I interviewed with Mike Wickman. Wickman School is named after him. Yeah. And he chose me to be a Parks and Rec commissioner in 1998.
Okay. I got
So
you
I've got 20 plus years in with the city now.
There you go.
It's so strange. But that's, and then after 8 years, Gary Larson retired as one of the original council members. And I had run once before and lost.
Okay.
In 2004. And in 2006, Gary Larson's spot opened up, and I ran and was successful.
There you go.
And been elected, I guess, 4 times now.
Very good. Congratulations.
And I thank the community for that. Appreciate it.
Very nice. Speaking of the community, what's your favorite part about the community?
Well, that's easy and it's hard.
Yeah, sure, I understand.
It is. I mean, this is such a family-oriented community. Once it formed, I'll tell you, the basis of this community started out right from the beginning. Just our original individuals that put this city together, they were very thoughtful in how we would piece it together, and the early decision making. I'm 2nd generation. I call myself 2nd generation. And now we have a 3rd generation going. But 2nd generation inherited some great policies that were in place. We had a great city manager at the time, Doug LaBelle, just a very well-respected individual, and he helped lead the city along with our council members. Mm-hmm. And at the time, original council members. And they put in place contracts such as our sheriffs, things like that. The sheriffs, what a great contract compared to having our own police department, as it's turning out for a lot of cities now.
Right.
But the whole genesis of this really was families. We're essentially a bedroom community. We've had to change a little bit just to get some money in our coffers, and that was planned by Doug LaBelle over those years. But it's the whole family atmosphere that is, I find most impressive about our city, and how close the churches are, and how close. In fact, this morning was this prayer day that we had.
Right.
It was a fantastic event. But how all the youth leagues get together and the dance classes and everybody, it's just such a family-oriented community, and that's what impresses me most about our community, and I think that's what draws people. We can talk about what draws people here and why they stay here at some point, whenever you want to talk about that, but it's the whole family atmosphere that sustains itself even with 85,000 people in town. Yeah. When we started as a city, we're about 43,000, or around there.
Okay. Gotcha.
But it's really that family base
Right.
still sustains
Yeah,
itself
makes
in
sense.
town.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
Zeroing in even more, what's your favorite restaurant in Chino Hills, or Chino? as well?
Yeah. I'm a equal opportunity consumer
Yeah.
when it comes to that. Well, it's interesting timing. If you'd asked me this, if we'd been interviewed a month or more ago, I wouldn't have had the same answer. Because we have, and I put it on Chino Hills Connections
Yeah,
about this, I don't know, 5 weeks ago or so, and it was in the newspaper that I was quoted as saying. So my favorite restaurant is about to open in about a week, and it's Maisami. So Maisami had a history here, as we know, and then Sammy decided he needed some time off, and the rent was going up, and he needed to move. He moved to Upland. But now he's coming back to Chino Hills. I was just there last night.
Okay.
He had, I wouldn't call it a soft opening, he
Okay.
just had a friend that was a chef, and he needed to get everything tuned up.
Yeah, yeah.
So he did some experiments on
Okay.
a couple of us and a lot of his family members last night.
Good for you.
So amazing me. But I will say, and I love the family one. I mean, we all love Wood Ranch and all of those that have
Yeah,
come in.
yeah.
Because I was here during a time when there was only a couple restaurants in town. That was a big criticism.
Right.
Gas stations and restaurants.
Right, yeah.
One grocery store, Alpha Beta,
Yeah,
at the time.
yeah.
But broadening where we like to go, and my wife and I like to go out often. So Pizzioli is
Okay.
kind of our Cheers bar.
Yeah,
And we've been going since the week or two that they opened.
Yeah.
So it's 20 plus 22, 23, 24 years, however long their history is. And then also, but I'd say our current favorite dining, until Maisami gets her feet on the ground, is Owen's Bistro.
got it, yeah.
And Owens is our go-to, and I heard you refer to it in Denise's interview.
Yeah.
And Owens is our place. I mean, we love going there. We go maybe 8 times a year,
Yeah.
so it's frequent enough.
Yeah.
And yet we can still share the
Yeah.
love with our other restaurants in town.
There you go.
And Owens Bistro is the place.
Very good.
I'm telling you.
Very good. Now, if you could have a large billboard in the middle of the 71 freeway for everybody going up and down the 71 in Chino and Chino Hills, what would it say and why?
Well, if it was a lot of people in town, I think the current trend would be do not move here. I think. What would that be? Well, I'm kind of a family-oriented person, so I'd probably be welcome to Chino Valley. Families come first,
Yeah.
or something like that. If we're kind of talking like
Yeah.
that, that's probably what I would say.
Just to continue that
And
mentality.
I'm just that's my
Yeah.
whole reason for being in this community. I would say it's just so that's how my billboard would reflect.
Very good. Yeah, I did some research and noticed on some social medias that you spent some time up in the wine country. I know you're
Mhm.
from Bakersfield, but you spent some time up in the wine country.
Correct.
You want to talk a little bit about that? Do you
Certainly.
have ties up there? I know Bakersfield, it's getting up there. But...
Yeah, well, come inland from there.
Yeah.
Big into wine.
Okay.
So I remember everybody knows it in town. I get the phone calls, hey, I'm heading for, well, let me back up. Big into wine.
Yeah.
From Cal Poly days. I took the wine class at the hospitality,
Yeah.
restaurant
Yeah.
hospitality. My mother, French, I'm half Canadian.
Okay.
Because my mother's from Montreal, Canada, and she was one of those that actually, even though she was from Canada, she signed up when they immigrated to the United States as a youth to be in the Army.
Okay.
But that whole French base, just got into it, and these days, my wife and I bought a second home during the economic downturn when we had saved up some cash. Said, okay, real estate's the way to go. Where are you gonna buy a second place? We looked all around and said, we ended up in Paso Robles
Okay.
8.5 years ago
Yeah.
as a second home. And it's just an investment home. No one lives in it, and so we go up once a month. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We're just up there this weekend. And that's a wine country. And we do, I'm really into wine because a lot of it, and a lot of friends know that, so we've done, I do a lot of wine dinners with friends. I do a lot for charity.
Yeah.
As a lot of people know me, have attended. We do dinner with the mayor, even if I'm not mayor. It's known as dinner with the
Yeah,
mayor.
got it.
And Let It Be Foundation as an example. I've been in auction for dinner with the mayor a couple times. Last time was 2 Septembers ago, and it's usually 8 people plus my wife and I would host at our home. We take care of everything.
Very nice.
And we picked up $3,400 for that.
There you
dinner
go.
with the mayor.
There you go.
But it's turned into one of those things, and it's kind of a passion. I love the history of it. When we travel to Europe,
Yeah.
we go to many of the wine
Yeah.
countries, and it's just the whole history and how soils affect things. And
Sure.
I'm now starting to sound like the movie Sideways, where they really get into it.
Yeah, right.
I hark back to that scene, but really into it, and into it enough that even though I'm really busy with a lot of commitments and a lot of committees, I studied, and I don't know if I posted this on Facebook. I think my wife may have, that I got a sommelier's. I got my certificate to be a sommelier.
Wow.
Last October.
Wow.
3 months ago, 4
Okay.
months ago. So, if you've ever seen the movie Somm or Somm 2 or whatever those movies are called, that's a level 4 sommelier. That's people, you know. Oh, this is from the Rusan Valley, and this is 19, you know, whatever.
Right.
I'm not that level.
Right.
But I am Somm 1 now.
Okay.
Sommelier 1 or Somm 1.
Good
So
for
I
you.
passed the test
Yeah.
end of last October.
Very nice. Good for you.
So, but that's, you're right. So we're in
Yeah.
Paso Robles
Okay.
all
Got
the
it.
time.
Okay.
But I do get texts and calls from people all throughout Chino Hills.
Yeah.
We're going out for a long weekend. Where should we go?
There
What
you go.
restaurant should we go to? And what
Yeah.
winery should we go to? But it's been an awesome experience for us, again, having this second home, because we've built a very tight infrastructure of friends up there also.
Yeah, makes sense.
So my wife's the one that posts most of the time about the different activities that we're doing up there, but I'm not surprised
Yeah.
you saw a lot of postings on Paso
Very
Robles.
nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
So that's the wine connection
Okay.
and the Paso Robles.
Good deal.
connection. Yeah, we love it. We
Yeah.
love it up there.
What's the best advice you were ever given?
Best advice, well, I'll broaden that a little bit. I think, I'm not sure if I can take it that way, but going to Catholic school and going to Damien, their basis was volunteerism.
Hello.
And I think, if you want to call it advice, the advice was just attending Damien and all the volunteering that was recommended to you
Sure.
to graduate,
Yeah.
let's put it that
Yeah.
way. So I remember doing a lot of volunteerism in my days at Damien, especially as a junior and senior, when we had access to a car and could drive around
Yeah.
as 16, 17-year-olds. So I don't know if that's advice more
Yeah.
than just, it helped set me on a path
Right.
that I don't know if I necessarily was on. And I was a good kid in school. I was, you know, the shy guy in school and getting the A's in conduct and all
Yeah.
that, you know, Catholic school. And I think that helped broaden my footprint on maybe things I would do in the future.
Sure. Just giving back your time and just kind of.
And
the
that
value of-
eventually translated to what's happening right now.
Yeah. Yeah, makes sense.
So that's that.
Very good.